Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I started working at this media company back in the 60s when I was just a young guy down on my luck. Started at the bottom, worked in the printing presses, joined the union, and slowly worked my way up. Over the years, I got to learn every aspect of the business: writing, photography, design, you name it. Eventually made it to middle management. Things were great until new owners took over. They started cleaning house, especially targeting the higher paid veterans. They couldn't fire me directly because of my union contract, so they tried everything else. For 5 years, they cut my budget, wrote me up for bogus reasons, but I contested everything, and they couldn't make anything stick. Finally, they moved me to sales and distribution. I didn't mind, I was good at it. Every year we had to submit bids showing how well we'd perform and what budget we'd need. I took pride in my work, including detailed risk assessments, delivery costs, partnership benefits, the whole 9 yards. My bosses appreciated the thoroughness. I was old school in my approach. Instead of just making phone calls, I'd drive out to meet clients face to face. Build trust, you know. Then this guy shows up. Let's call him the entitled manager. He starts shadowing me, acting all friendly. He approached me saying he wanted to learn from me, mentioning how my long experience must mean I know everything. I was polite and told him I'd be happy to show him the ropes. He stuck to me like glue, but I noticed he hated my approach to business. He constantly questioned why we needed to drive out to meet clients, suggesting we could just call or email them instead. I explained to him that personal connections matter in this business and that people appreciate face-to-face meetings. I taught him everything: how to analyze data, prepare reports, make bids. Even showed him my system for creating efficient proposals. Then came bid season. I worked harder than ever that year because the internet was changing everything. Magazine sales were dropping, and I needed to account for that. I put together a detailed 20-page report and submitted it 3 days early. That's when the entitled manager showed his true colors. He intercepted my bid and submitted his own made-up report. He claimed he could double sales with half the budget, just using cold calls and emails. No data, no evidence, just empty promises. I got called into a meeting with upper management. They told me they had reviewed both proposals and were going with the other one, and that they'd have to let me go. When I asked to see the winning proposal, they simply told me it was confidential. Later I found out the truth. The entitled manager had been planted by the company specifically to push me out. But here's the thing. He only intercepted my bid, not my supporting data and reports. Those detailed analyses that proved why my numbers were realistic, he never saw them. I took my severance pay and left without a word. Started my own business, a small store that grew into 3 locations. A year later I got a call. Upper management reached out to tell me they'd made a terrible mistake and that the numbers weren't adding up. They asked if I would consider coming back. I politely declined, telling them I was doing quite well on my own. Turns out the entitled manager's fake reports and impossible promises caught up with him. After 3 failed attempts to meet his made-up targets, he was fired. The company kept declining because they couldn't adapt to the internet age. Last I heard, the entitled manager was struggling to find work because his reputation for fabricating reports had spread in the industry. Meanwhile, my stores are doing great and I'm planning to open a 4th location. You know what's funny? If they'd just let me implement my original plans for adapting to digital media, things might have turned out differently for them. But I guess some people have to learn the hard way that experience and honesty matter more than empty promises. After my tech startup crashed and burned in Silicon Valley, I needed a fresh start. New York seemed like the perfect place to reinvent myself, even if it meant taking a pay cut and working as a junior developer at a small firm. That's how I found myself at 27, searching through sketchy Craigslist listings for affordable housing. The rental market was brutal, but I got lucky, or so I thought at the time. I connected with this guy who needed a roommate for a two-bedroom apartment. The rent seemed surprisingly reasonable for Manhattan, which should have been my first red flag. We met up, grabbed a beer, and clicked instantly. He was a musician trying to make it in the city while working as a barista. Different worlds, but we shared the same dark humor and love for old-school video games. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it had character, and the location was perfect. We signed the sublease that week. Everything was great for the first few months. We'd have gaming marathons on weekends, split the chores without drama, and actually enjoyed hanging out together. Neither of us knew our landlady was running an illegal operation, subletting her government-assisted apartment at market rates. We were just happy to have found an affordable place in the city. Then came that scorching July afternoon. I was at work debugging some nightmare code when my phone started blowing up with messages from my roommate. He frantically texted me that I needed to come home immediately because some crazy girl was trying to break down our door. When I asked who it was, he replied that she was claiming to be the landlady's daughter and had garbage bags full of stuff, threatening to call the cops. I rushed home to find this scene straight out of a reality TV show. This girl, couldn't have been more than 18, was having a full-on meltdown in our living room. 3 massive black garbage bags were spilled across our floor, clothes and personal items everywhere. She started screaming that this was her mom's apartment and we needed to get out immediately. When I tried to reason with her, explaining that we had a lease and paid rent every month, she just screamed back that she didn't care and threatened to call the police if we didn't let her move in. My roommate and I exchanged looks. We both knew this was about to get messy. The next 3 days were absolute chaos. The girl would blast music at 3 a.m., leave rotting takeout containers all over the kitchen, and constantly threaten to call the police. Then her mom showed up, trying to play mediator, but actually making everything worse. She tried pleading with us to understand, asking if we could just let her daughter stay in the living room. When I pointed out that we were already paying full rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, she brushed it off, saying it would only be temporary, maybe a few months. The situation finally exploded when they actually called the police. I had to leave an important meeting at work when my roommate called in a panic. By the time I got home, 2 officers were standing in our living room looking thoroughly done with the situation. The mother-daughter duo was putting on quite a show. The daughter was crying about how we were squatters in her mother's apartment, while the mom was going on about her rights as the owner. One of the officers had to escort them into the hallway because they wouldn't stop screaming. That's when one of the building's tenant representatives, who'd been drawn by the commotion, dropped the bomb about the apartment being part of a government assistance program. The officer's expressions changed immediately. Suddenly, the mother and daughter got very quiet. My roommate and I decided it wasn't worth the drama. We found a new place within a week, a legitimate rental this time, even if it meant paying more. When we were moving out, I remembered my industrial-grade bedroom door lock, the one I'd installed after living in some sketchy places in California. Neither the mom nor the daughter had a key. Looking at that door, I had an idea. I went to the kitchen and found the package of ground beef we'd forgotten about. It had been sitting in the back of the fridge for who knows how long, already starting to turn. Perfect. I walked into my old room, placed the meat right in the center of the floor, and locked the door behind me. The window unit was off, and in the July heat, that room was already like an oven. I knew that in a few days that meat would create an unforgettable welcome gift for our entitled friends. A month later, I was walking past our old building and saw a hazmat cleaning crew going in. From the open windows, I could hear the daughter screaming about the smell that wouldn't go away, no matter how much they cleaned. The tenant representative was there too, looking through paperwork with what appeared to be a housing authority official. The mom lost her lease due to the illegal subletting, and the daughter had to move back to wherever she came from. My roommate and I found a better apartment in Brooklyn, where we still game on weekends, but now we always make sure to clean out the fridge before the meat goes bad. I spent over 3 decades working in information technology, specializing in network infrastructure and systems migration. After countless projects across the country, I was looking forward to my retirement, But I had one last major project to complete in Philadelphia. The client was a well-established company transitioning from their outdated computer system to a modern network setup. It was supposed to be a straightforward job: install new servers, upgrade the accounting department's computers, and modernize their retail unit's sales systems. I arrived at the facility, which was situated in a rather rough neighborhood. The building itself was decent enough, and the company was expanding, adding a new wing to accommodate their growth. I had my cable maps ready and was making good progress with the initial server installation when they hired a new manager. She was this young redhead, probably fresh out of college, who walked around like she owned the place. The way she spoke to people made my skin crawl. Always condescending, always acting like everyone else was beneath her. But what really got under my skin was how she treated the new receptionist. The company had just hired this brilliant young Latina woman as their receptionist and switchboard operator. She was perfectly professional, bilingual, and handled multiple calls with impressive efficiency. But from day one, the new manager had it out for her. One morning, I greeted the receptionist and asked her how she was finding the new phone system. She replied politely, telling me she had already memorized all the extensions and was getting faster at transferring calls. The manager happened to walk past at that moment and rudely interrupted, demanding that the response time needed to be under 3 rings. She then criticized the receptionist's accent, claiming customers could barely understand her. When the receptionist quietly mentioned that she hadn't received any complaints about her accent, the manager snapped back that she herself was complaining now. The neighborhood being what it was, we all looked out for each other. Being a bigger guy, over 6 feet tall and around 200 pounds, I often accompanied the female employees to the local sandwich shop for lunch. It was just common sense safety, and I enjoyed the company. One day, the manager called me into her office. She said she needed to discuss my behavior with the staff. When I asked if there was a problem, she complained that I was being too friendly with certain employees, particularly the receptionist and her friends, calling it unprofessional. I reminded her that as a subcontractor, I needed to maintain good working relationships with all employees to effectively do my job. She dismissed this, saying she didn't approve and that these people needed to understand their place. I stood my ground and told her that their place was as valued employees of this company, and I would continue treating them with the respect they deserved. A few days later, the manager decided to show everyone how brave she was by going to the sandwich shop alone. She'd been refusing to ask anyone to accompany her because most of us were friendly with the employees she disliked. When she got to the shop, there was a group of teenage Latina girls hanging out front, regular customers from the local high school. Instead of just walking past them, she stormed into the shop and started demanding the owner kick them out. The shop owner explained that they were paying customers who had never caused any trouble. The manager insisted they were loitering and intimidating other customers, demanding they be removed. The owner refused, telling her that this was their neighborhood and they came there every day after school. She grabbed her sandwich and stormed out, deliberately shoving through the group of girls. Well, these teenagers weren't about to take that kind of treatment. There was a scuffle, and she came limping back to the office looking like she'd been through a tornado. Torn blouse, ripped skirt, and a broken heel. She immediately called the police, claiming she'd been assaulted by a gang. When the officers arrived, they found no group of girls, but they did talk to the shop owner. The owner told them how the woman had come in causing trouble, demanded he kick out his regular customers, and then shoved the girls first. He declared that she wasn't welcome back in his shop. The final straw came a week later. One of our biggest customers sent their project manager, a highly accomplished Latina woman in her mid-30s, to discuss some special orders for a major new project. The manager refused to work with her, making thinly veiled racist comments and being deliberately obstructive. The company owner happened to walk in during this meeting. He stood in the doorway for about 2 minutes, listening to the manager's behavior, then walked straight up to her. He immediately fired her, ordering her to clean out her desk and telling her security would escort her out. When she tried to protest, he cut her off, saying he'd heard enough and that they'd had multiple complaints about her behavior, which he had just witnessed himself and found unacceptable. The project manager tried to smooth things over, saying she didn't want to cause any trouble, while the owner assured her she wasn't causing anything. He explained that this had been building for weeks and apologized for not addressing it sooner. The manager was escorted out that afternoon, still protesting that everyone was against her. The owner personally apologized to the project manager and the receptionist, and things got much better after that. I finished my network installation project in peace, and it turned out to be a perfect last assignment before retirement. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30 male and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient explained that she had tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We began asking her the standard assessment questions about her condition, pain levels, and memory of the fall. She described having a pounding headache and explained that her last memory was walking to bed before waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noting the bruise, I asked about blood thinners. She confirmed she was on them due to a previous stroke from a few years ago. We explained the importance of going to the hospital for scans due to the risk of brain bleeding. She agreed and we began to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She indicated she had no neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. When we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor suddenly burst through her door, complaining loudly about the lights and noises disturbing her sleep. The sound of the stair chair had apparently woken her up. My lieutenant approached her and apologetically explained the medical emergency situation, assuring her we'd be leaving soon. Upon recognizing her neighbor as our patient, the caring neighbor changed her tune completely. She began protesting that we couldn't take her neighbor to the hospital because she needed her for child care the next day while she ran errands. My lieutenant reiterated the medical priority of the situation over errands, which prompted the entitled neighbor to huff and slam her door. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open, revealing the entitled neighbor, who had apparently taken time to get dressed before coming outside. When I demanded to know what she was doing, she repeated her insistence about needing our patient for childcare the next day. She then attempted to physically pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Fortunately, she couldn't figure out how to unlatch it. Our patient tried explaining that she couldn't watch the kids due to her fall and possible stroke, but the entitled neighbor dismissed her concerns, insisting she was fine and didn't need hospital care. My partner, hearing the commotion, came to the back of the ambulance. He pulled her off the cot, and I slammed and locked the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer, and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. When I asked my patient about the situation, she explained that the entitled neighbor regularly abandons her 3 young kids at her house for hours at a time without warning. My patient had no idea about any child care expectations for the next day since the entitled neighbor never communicates these things in advance. Small update, My contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. Update: the patient is back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file for an order of protection from the neighbor, and she, with the help of her daughter, managed to apply for the order. I got in touch with the officer. Long story short, the entitled neighbor was just kind of a jerk. I am, however, hoping that the patient presses charges for assault. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.